Right, today I've come to Great Rollright to see the standing stones known as the King's Men and the Whispering Knights. They range from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, and I think you'll find them kind of interesting, kind of weird. Not nearly as impressive as some other standing stones like Stonehenge, but they are deeply individual and personal, as you will see as I take you around them. So these are the Whispering Knights. The names for all of these stones are modern folklore, 16th century, and these would have originally been 4 standing stones with a capstone on top, and it's thought that they would have been a burial chamber, but we can't find any examples of someone who was buried in there. It would have definitely been a spiritual site. What its exact purpose is, people aren't sure. There were theories that there was a barrow here, or a round barrow, or some have thought that there might have even been foundations for a much larger barrow, but there's no evidence of any of that. It does seem to be the 4 standing stones with a giant boulder on top. These stones are oolite, which is a type of limestone, and it's very easily weathered, and that's why you get these really fascinating pockmarked designs. Compared to other standing stones, these weren't quarried, they weren't dragged a huge distance. The current theory is they were naturally occurring boulders from down in that valley that was then dragged up to the top of the hill. And that means that compared to other standing stones, these were very easily erected. One historian, I'm afraid I can't remember his name, he described the amount of manpower as trivial. It was something that basically bored farmers could manage without needing to have a large civilization with large amounts of surplus manpower. Certainly when it came to reorganizing the site, 2 horses were all it took to move these stones. According to legend, the reason these stones and the other stones I'll show you exist is that they were a king and his knights turned into stone, and these knights are the Whispering Knights. These knights were clustered together further away from the group, conspiring to do the witch in, and so she turned them all to stone. You can see people have been flicking money into here. Don't know why they've done that. It is a very strange British tradition to flick money into almost any well or fountain or anything really where you can flick money into it, but usually there's water involved. I don't know why they've done that. There is contemporary paganism here. You can see a star that somebody's put there as an offering and other small items. Yeah, contemporary paganism is often associated with these sorts of stones. Anyway, these are the Whispering Knights, and now I'll go and show you the King's Men. Right, and these stones here are the King's Men. Now, the time difference is important. So, if we pan across, over there, that small smudge over there, that's the Whispering Knights. And they were erected 3,500 BC, 3,500 BC. These were erected 2,000 years later in 1,500 BC. So there is as much time difference between those 2 sets of stones as there is between us and the Romans. So these stones are all put in a quite close circle. They are the same type of stone, local oolite, and again very heavily weathered. Some of the lichens on these stones have been dated to about 300 or 400 years old, making them older than the United States. That's the sheer amount of time that we're talking here. These stones, they think, would have originally fitted very closely together, possibly not perfectly, but originally very closely, to create an enclosed space, maybe with some kind of wooden roof, maybe without, but it would have created a very private space with only one entrance and exit. About a third of these stones were re-erected in 1882, having fallen over or been half buried. And this very tall stone here, this one, had been taken away to make a bridge over a stream and was put back. They are quite nice. According to the legend, these were also all turned into stone by a witch. These were the king's loyal attendants and servants, again according to the legend. And again, there is some neo-paganism here. If I go back over the other side, we can see little pieces of it. Somebody's left some flowers in the centre there. And I believe this to be neo-paganism. I mean, it might just be somebody's unusual affection for a tree, but all manner of ribbons and silks have been tied to this tree. The blossom is actually quite lovely. Just, yeah. It's all over England at the moment. It's blossom season. Not good for those with hay fever, but very pretty. Yeah, so if these were all very closely fitting, you can imagine the sense of personal space it would have, the personal space of privacy it would have given you, because you have to imagine at the time these hills would have been cleared for farming and would be very open, while down in the valleys there probably would have still been forests. Due to the marshy, hard, clay, cloying nature of valley soils, hills were almost always cleared first in England. So having a great stone enclosure like this was a great symbol of status. Whether it would have been used for religious ceremonies, or as a tribal meeting house, or even just a great status symbol for the people who lived here, saying, look at us, we've got a giant stone house. It's difficult to say, but it would have definitely been very impressive if you imagine all these trees stripped away and just the barren hillside with these stones sitting out on top of them. And here you get a sense of how closely they would have originally fit together. They would have overlapped and possibly, depending on how well they were shaped, fitted quite closely. The stones were put up 1500 BC, so bronze tools would have been around. So it would have been relatively easy to shape these. Again, the difficulty of erection of the stones was probably fairly low. The stones were local, they were down in that valley, probably didn't have to have been quarried, or if they were quarried would have been very close to the surface. So again, the general view is that it's a comparatively trivial amount of manpower. A group of 50 or 60 men could have done it in a fairly short amount of time, a couple of hours per stone, so not something dramatically difficult such as Stonehenge or Avebury Ring, where the stones are much larger. Oh, how nice, somebody left some rubbish behind. Yeah, so yeah, sorry, the rubbish has completely ruined my train of thought. Thanks rubbish leavers. While I've mentioned other stone circles from the south of England, Stonehenge and Avebury Ring, it should be noted that this stone circle is not typical for South England. This sort of stone circle appears to have no astrological significance, nothing like a calendar at all, and is much more similar to stone circles found in Wales and Cumbria and Scotland. So it suggests that the people living here were either very closely related to those people or had a lot of cultural cross-pollination with those people, as you just don't get this sort of stone circle in South England, Southwest England, even South Wales. It's very much a North Wales, Cumbria, Western Scotland sort of thing to build. Now, to get to the Kingstone, we actually have to cross the road. Though that's the ring over there, that's the road, and then across here, over there is the Kingstone. Now, the Kingstone hasn't been accurately dated to any one point in time. They aren't sure whether it was erected with the stone circle or with the Whispering Knights. It's very difficult to tell because it is just the one stone, so there's less clues. And they're not even sure exactly what it was used for. Initial suggestions were that it was used as a waypoint to show where the important sites nearby were, or where the village was. But it's not actually a very high point. It's not on the top of the hill. It's not very tall. It would be unusual for that to be its purpose. Then other suggestions were perhaps it marked the opening of a barrow, but excavations around it have not shown any barrow immediately nearby. There's remnants of a barrow somewhere over there. I'm afraid I don't know exactly where. But here there is nothing, so that's not what it's for. The best solution put forward, the one that most archaeologists are tentatively agreeing to, is that it was some sort of cemetery marker. In a similar way we'd put up a headstone, or on the marble crosses at the war graves. They think this might have served a similar purpose, just a big monument to the dead in general, or in specific, just to say this is where the dead are buried in this nearby area. But it does go to show how little we know about that period in time. I mean, we don't even know when it was put up. So again, local oolite, came from the valley nearby, and the legend goes that this is the king. This is the king who met a witch, and he wanted to know if he would be king of all England, and the witch told him that if he could climb to the top of the hill and see Long Compton, he would be king. But he considered that this was impossible because Long Compton can't be seen from the top of this hill, and when he suggested that the witch was double-crossing him, she turned him into stone. At least that's the variation of the legend I know. Other legends have other beliefs. So king was turned to stone for doubting the witch. King's men over there were his servants, and they were turned to stone along with him. The Whispering Knights were, having seen that their king had been turned to stone, conspired to kill the witch, and so she turned them to stone as well. And depending on the legend, sometimes she's waiting to turn other people into stone. Other times she has turned herself into a tree to watch over the stones for the rest of time. Yeah, so it's an interesting legend, and it gives all the stones their names. But it is frustrating that all the details of the original purpose for these stones have been lost.